Dr. Arnita Fowler, and I'm so glad that you can join me today. I am here today to discuss my book. So I just want to make sure that you could see and hear me. Can everyone see and hear me okay? But thank you. So um, the title of my book today is Leadership is a Choice. And you're probably wondering why I came up with that name. And I could tell you a lot of stories about why that name. But let me first tell you why I wanted to be able to pin this topic on leadership. Uh, though I know that everybody talks about leadership, and you probably have heard more than enough than what you want than your share of leadership. But this is an opportunity that I was inspired by other research I've done. Um, and let me just tell you through our story. So some years ago, back in 2000, I lived in a neighborhood in New York where there weren't any libraries, any bookstores. And so I had a desire and I prayed about it and I talked about it. And to ultimately, God allowed me to be able to establish a bookstore in the neighborhood called Mo Better Books. And I didn't have to invest in marketing. It was in a great area. But I share that story to tell you that uh, this is one reason why I decided to write this, pin my story on leadership as a choice. Because leadership is a choice. What we do with leadership, how we walk into leadership, and who we're leading. If this past year has done nothing but taught us that everything we do as a leader uh, could mean the difference between life and death for some. I treat leadership as I do preaching. My word and the gospel that I share could be the difference between life and death. And so, leadership has been a deep passion of mine for some years. But I wanted to talk about the fact that leadership has been on center stage for quite some time. It did not just appear on stage, but leadership has been it's such a broad area. And so tomorrow I get into a specific area of leadership in regards to succession leadership, Moses and Joshua, and equipping the next generation. So come back tomorrow. But for today, I just wanted to see if I can answer some questions and see if you had any questions for me. But I would say to you that leadership being a choice is that you have to lead from where you are. One of the questions I heard most in this past year and maybe 2 years, but maybe the past 4 years is we're looking for new leadership. We're looking for who's going to be um, the new Martin Luther King, who's going to be the leader for the current generation. And I would just say to everyone that um, you have the opportunity to step into leadership roles right now without waiting for permission. And that is why I say leadership is a choice. You do not have to wait for permission to be a leader. You can lead from where you are. And that is exactly what Stacey Abrams did. She led from the outside. She saw what problems that existed in her community with voting. And this has been a 10-year process for her. But she dug in and she decided to do something about it. And that's why I say leadership is a choice. Oftentimes we wait to be handed leadership positions, but that is waiting for permission. And so, again, that is one point in regards to leadership being a choice. One thing I did not want to do, and if y'all don't mind today, I don't have slides or anything. I just want to speak from the heart because that is exactly how I was inspired about leadership. Is that leadership to me is creating spaces for other people. It's not to take up space, and it's not a cliche. It really is to create space for other people. See who it is that needs your guidance. I believe I made a success at leadership in my military career because I was able to make a human connection with people, I mean, meeting them where they are, literally. If I was in the field and someone needed something, Specifically, there was a young lady who had come from downrange, and she was injured, and she just woke up one day, and she was trying to communicate what it is that was wrong with her. And it wasn't anything to do with her medical condition. It was just her desire to have someone to care for her personal uh, presence, to let her know that she mattered and what she was doing was not in vain. She just needs someone to connect to. And so when I talk about leadership as a choice, that means that our voice needs to be at the table. And with all the struggles that we're facing today regarding social uh, injustice and desire for racial equity, we have to be able to have a place at the table. And if there's no table, then bring your own table. But our voice needs to be in the room. And so I'm I'm hoping that my book would encourage people to see where their role is and to not wait, that we are right now in a season of opportunities. And that's what I write about, is that you could choose to look at this season that we've come through and that we're in as a season of crisis, or you could look at it as a season of opportunities. And I see it as a season of opportunities that have put fresh demands for those who have agency to make a difference, agency to take charge and cause change to happen, to step into the role right now. And so that's what we talk about, leadership as a choice. And we talk about the fact that lead from where you are. I'll pause for right quickly and see if there's any questions for me or any comments you want to make before I go on. Because I could talk about leadership in regards to um, how it is contextualized for African American, how it's contextualized for Black women in leadership. So I just pause for a minute and see if there's any questions or comments. So I would go on to talk about the fact that leadership, I wrote about leadership also. When I say leadership is, there's a time to lead and there's a time to leave. I would like to know, what's the first thought that comes to your mind when you see that title, that leadership is a choice. It's a time to lead and it's a time to leave. Just kind of want to see what you would, what you thinking when you hear that topic. Not sure if you can see the title, but um, so leadership, I would say this as you continue to ponder that, is that leadership, for the most part, or for the main part, I would share with you, is not a birthright. Meaning, leadership is not restricted to or reserved for any one person or a specific gender or specific age group. We have leaders who are coming up and growing up uh, at all ages and in different locations for different causes. And that's where you have to find your passion in regards to leadership being a choice. Um, I challenge people today to just step into their role of being a leader, specifically because we need leadership right now. And no one can speak for us better than those who look like us. And so I talk about that in my book. I talk about how our own representation, our own life experiences bring value to the table. It also brings an interpretation to the table that has often been left out when it comes to African American um, women as leaders, or when it comes to Black neighborhoods and what it is that we need in our neighborhood. Um, that's why we have to be able to talk about personally from what that experience looked like. I know in my career, in my military career, I found myself often advocating for those who look like me, or for those who would be counted out as being a leader. As I serve, uh, when I serve in leadership, I speak from a place of faith, just like I would if I'm doing ministry, because leadership is across every industry, regardless whether you are the church house, the schoolhouse, or even your house, and specifically the White House. And so I spent this past year, if you could see my view, I could actually see into DC, and every morning was hard for me to wake up, knowing how I stood and had a passion for leadership and be able to look at the fact that um, leadership should be transformational. It should be a representation of the humility of Christ. And so it was hard for me to get up in the morning and not see that. And so I thought that if nothing else, then we need to also write our story. And so writing this book also allowed me to be able to put something in writing that would be on the shelf from a perspective of African American leader, from a Black woman leader, from a minority. Um, I see a question here, Rosalind. Thank you for the question. You say that would leaving a church as a leader be handled the same as leaving some secular entity? I think that when it comes to whether you're leaving a church or whether you're leaving a secular entity, the question is, would you stay be better? If you're, are you able to serve in that role and still deliver what it is, God has given you to do? But being that there's a time to leave, that just means that also you have to look at your situation and pray about that. I say leaving an organization and leaving a church could be that you have taken the vision as far as you can take the vision, or that the vision has changed. I talk about this when I say don't judge, because my story is not your story as a leader. And leaving the church, some people like to give it different names, but there are different reasons for leaving. There could be, like I said, change in vision. It could be a planned or unplanned departure. And I think that's what we have to really consider. I said, when you have led in the church for almost 3 decades and that it seems to be no positive results happening, is it now time to leave? I believe that it's time to continue the journey. Again, let's talk about, we're in a season where to everything there's a season. And there's sometimes there that requirement to shift roles. You have led and you have taken the vision as far as you can. And this is where I talk about in my presentation tomorrow in regards to how far Moses could take the children of Israel and where Joshua took over at the border in Canaan. And so we just really have to understand what our role is as a leader, and then what season that we're in as a leader, and what God is calling us to be today. So that's the other part I talk about in the book. Thank you for that question, Ron. I know sometimes it's hard to let go, and that is why I was very distinct in the title of the book, so it could be clear if they didn't get any further than the front page or the cover, is that there's definitely a time to lead and a time to leave. And only you know your situation, and you know what the vision was when you stepped into the leadership. And now that doesn't mean that the leadership journey has ended. It just has ended in that specific position. And so I look at it as elevation. And then when I say time to leave, doesn't mean time to stop. Time to leave just means you have to sometimes go, go so you can grow also. And so when I talk about go so you can grow, you may have grown to the best of what that position has to offer you. You know, long gone the days where we used to get jobs in government and we would stay forever. Who remember those days? And so, and if you talk about leadership, and that's the other reason why I wrote about this, is that when I say leadership is not a birthright, I talk about the fact that the generation that's coming up now, as far as the next generation of leaders, and then the which is the millenniums, and then the generation Zen right behind them, we have to be able as leaders to recognize our role as a leader and be willing to shift. I mean, staying in position. It may not be effective if you just stand there, because leadership is not about position. Leadership is about action. Are you creating space for others to step into leadership? you know, when I was in one of my bases that I was in, and I was at the bottom tier of my top rank, or in the middle tier of my top rank, and I didn't know how many more years I had to serve. But here's what I did know, is that I had been promoted to, had been mentored to a certain level, that in my unit that I was at the top of my department. So what was I going to do? Continue to stay there? just because I had that position, or was I going to create space for the next person to come in? Was I molding and shaping the next person to be able to step into that role? Because leadership should be able to continue to duplicate or replicate good leaders, and not just for position wise, but because you know what the desire is and what the needs are. Here's the thing: when I stepped into the position that I was in as superintendent, it didn't just come lightly. Again, people would like to think that we have to wait for permission. We don't have to wait for permission to step into leadership roles. Sometimes people just, out of tradition, just sit around and we stumble into leadership because someone says, well, let's see who rises to the top. And let's see let's see who excels. Uh, and here's what I say to that. If I've been mentored in that position, if you have been mentoring me and yet you're mentoring me from the inside, but you're hiring from the outside, then there's something wrong with that picture. If you're mentoring me from the inside, but you're hiring from the outside, that's a challenge. And that's what I was up against, is that the potential for someone else to be able to step into a position that I had been prepping and been mentored for. And it took a conversation, because again, I had to come to the table and explain what that looks like through my lens as an African American person who had the education, who had the qualification, and who was had the evaluation to speak for itself. But if we don't step into the roles of leadership, be it inside an organization or inside of a church, or if we don't have those tough conversations, then people will feel or believe that everything must be all right. And so it requires us having our voice at the table. Again, it goes back into representation. We need to have someone who looks like us to represent us. When we started this pandemic, I started what I call candid conversations, because I wanted to see what is God calling me to do in this season. And what could I contribute? What had God prepared me for this day? Surely God wastes nothing. And so I believe that God has equipped all of us to be able to step into a role of leadership from where we are. And that's why I say that this is a time to lead, and then there is a time to leave. You have to be able to be in tune to that season of your life. And in this season of my life, I believe that God would like for me to be able to give voice to those who don't have a voice at this moment, or to be able to speak up and let people know, you don't need my permission, but what you need is to believe and know that everything that you need as a leader, you already have it in you. You already have it in you, so don't count yourself out. And that is why I said leadership is a choice. I choose. I chose to step into leadership then, when it looked like someone else was going to be hired from the outside, and I shared what it looked like from my lens. Like, if I've been in this role and you've been mentoring me, then how is it that I'm not being positioned? And so people like to say to you when it comes to church that maybe you should leave, and that's something that you have to pray over as an individual. But I would say to you, and this as a leader, again, I do nothing unless I pray about it. And I don't believe in church hopping. That's not the solution. I believe in helping to bring a solution to the table. It may not be accepted as it is, but at least I have a voice at the table so I can contribute to the conversation. Walking away does no one any good. And so you have to do a self-inventory and a self-reflection. Um, I'll pause for a minute before I go on and see if there's any questions from me at this time. Well, let's talk about why I would launch my book now. But I've been reading leadership for some time now, and the reason I would talk about leadership now and break it down tomorrow in more specific terms is because I believe that there has been a breach of leadership from what has been the traditional standard of leadership requirements. And so this is a good time to rethink leadership. because of the fact that if we don't speak up and we don't be able to show up in spaces and places where we can make a change and show up as an agency, I would have agency. I have agency to show up in places and to add my voice to the table and take action and make transition and transformation in political views. I did that when we had the missing persons law developed in New York, named for my son. No one can be able to tell our story and our experience the way we can. And so, though I talk about leadership as a choice and as a time to lead and a time to leave, um, there's also the time to be able to speak up in your leadership and to let people know what it is that is warranted in your community. And it may have taken some time, but here's the thing: when it comes to developing leaders, we have to ask that question: Are we doing development right? How do we even know that development has even been measured correctly? We are in a time right now where we have an opportunity to reset and to rethink leadership, as long as we are able to, while we're also able to look at rethinking church. When it comes to rethinking church, one of the things I tell myself is in the corporate world, uh, you always have to be able to have these tough conversations and always think you're advocating for something that uh, that is complex, more so than it needs to be. And so in church, I find that are we as leaders being open and transparent? Because that is one of the challenges that I speak about. Is as long as there's transparency in leadership, then people won't have to conclude or draw their own conclusions about leadership. And I think that is where you get your trusting. I know for a fact that's where you get your trust and your loyalty. And so we don't have the option as leaders, specifically in the church, to just not show up. We don't have the option to just not address a problem or a situation. I think it's crucial that those of us who are in church have a higher calling and responsibility and accountability for being a leader. And that's why I appreciate Rosalind's question when she asks, is leaving a church um, handled the same? I believe that we have a responsibility that for as long as we are in the role of leadership at a church, then we have a responsibility to be able to address situations in the church. Not addressing situations certainly doesn't fix it. And so I think it would serve us well not to hold our peace, but to have healthy conversations about leadership in regards to who is God calling you to be today in this season. When we talk about leadership being a choice, who is God calling you to be? Not what someone else has deemed you to be, or not the permission that the fact that someone has given you permission, but realizing that leadership is not a birthright. We look at leadership sometimes as an inheritance or as a plan. Uh, so the question is, when it comes to succession leadership, which I'll talk about tomorrow, is it a birthright? Is it an inheritance? Or is it something that should be considered as a uh, creating more Joshuas in this season? Um, so I'll talk about that tomorrow in regards to today you may be a Joshua, but tomorrow you might be a Moses. So that's what when we talk about leadership being a choice. It's definitely not for the paranoid. You can't be paranoid and be in leadership at the same time. You have to really believe and trust that everything that you are. And my book is speaking to the positivity of whoever you are and wherever God has called you to be. You're able to step into that role as a leader because you already have the leadership spirit to reach your potential. So the question is, are you being cultivated? Are you being nurtured? Is the next generation being nurtured to be able to step into leadership's role? We should be leading, whereas we're preparing others to step into the role. So when I say a time to lead and a time to lead, we should be preparing to lead so that others can come behind us and step in, because we need both our roots and innovation. So I like to celebrate the wisdom of those who have been in the leadership seat before us, and then to be able to work together for those who come after us. Uh, One of the things that really made me want to pen this is because imagine we talk about leadership in this season, and yet the only books we find on the shelves about leadership are from a Eurocentric perspective. I think that right there would be a high crime for me. So I wanted to be able to leave documented experiences from a African American perspective and a Black woman's perspective on the shelves, and that it would be able to be looked back in reference when we're talking about schools. We talk about critical race theory, and who is equipped to really speak to that fully, and if so, are you able to pen your experiences? Are you able to pen the knowledge that you know? We have to be able to leave that legacy on the table and be able to share the information with people, contribute. And that is why I wanted to write this, my book. I wanted to be able to share my experiences in God. No, it has not been all easy, but I am so grateful that I was able to find my passion about leadership and find my purpose about leadership, and to be able to help shape and create space for others to be able to become leaders. So that leadership is not all about the leader. It's not all about me. It is about what am I leaving as a legacy when it comes to leadership. Who am I able to create space for? And it does not have to look like me in regards to what I would um, carve out. It could be with that gift, but when we do targeted leadership, specific leadership, and I'll talk again about succession planning versus succession management, where we create Joshuas and versus just one um, Joshua. We create multiple Joshuas for each generation. Is when you do targeted leadership, I talk about the fact that imagine if you are doing only targeted leadership of the valuable experience and skills and people will have that you're not including in that uh, consideration for leadership opportunities. So that's why I want to talk about the difference tomorrow and in my book about succession planning versus succession management. Succession planning being where you identify one person for one specific role versus a bench of uh, target person, so that you can be able to build across an organization, and that you could build with change in mind, and that you could now, as you go forward building your strategic planning and your succession planning, you're actually in church building your succession management plan in the church along with your strategic plan, so that you have your leadership development and you have your succession management and you have your strategic plan, where it should all be married and merged together. And I think what we have done is we have just taken the old cookie cutter of leadership development, and then once we have reached the end of the development, the question becomes what next. So I'm encouraging people to go beyond leadership development and to talk about succession management, so that people have some predictability about their future. So that's why I said leadership is a choice, where we have the opportunity as leaders to be able to contribute back to the generation that's coming up, and invest in, and not just those who fit in our circle and think like us, but those who bring diversity to the table within our group. I'll pause again and see if there's any question. I appreciate the thought, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to be able to share. I'm excited about my book launch, because it's definitely given birth to something that I have labored over and feel very passionate about. And I know that when I say leadership to choice, I just want people to know that there are specific areas in leadership that I address in my book, and it's not just broad brush about leadership. One thing we also want to talk about is leadership styles. This is the opportunity that when you're now rebuilding or resetting and church opens up their doors, you have to really be able to look at, do I have what I need? Identify who I have, and then identify the organizational gaps. And this is the time where you would now identify those target personnel to build your bench of Joshuas across the organization, so that we're not reacting when change comes, but we already have change built into our plan. And so I want to be able to talk about that tomorrow. And that is where I have the passion to help anyone to be able to talk about their um, leadership journeys, their passion, their vision, and their mission. So I'll pause again and let us talk about anything that's a burning question. You want to have a burning question on their mind about leadership, or about being able to know about their personal journey and their personal situation of knowing when it's time to lead and when it's time to leave. Um, I think that is crucial, that a lot of changes have taken place in this past year where people have changed directions, or as we would say, pivoted. And so some would say you don't have to pivot if you build change into your plan, but not everybody uh, has the same strategic thought process. And so we will talk about succession planning in my book as a priority. Succession management, succession planning, most references, is a requirement for most secular organizations, but it's not a priority. So it's a requirement, but it's not a priority. And we need to make it a priority, and specifically in our churches, so that we could have transparency. Just because we are a nonprofit or we are a church, whether you're a nonprofit or for-profit, succession management is something that we should be able to do to build in integrity in the process and take out the guessing, take the guessing out of leadership as to who's next, or more so, who's leading, who are we leading, and who are we creating space for? And that's what I believe is important in the whole process of leadership is who are you as a current leader creating space for? And again, leadership does not have an age limit. So I believe at this point we could be able to talk about um, some of the restrictions, or who we think leadership is reserved for. And that is what my books kind of really dig into and get to the heart of the matter of leadership, being able to help one to reach their potential. And that's really what leadership is all about, is helping a person reach their potential, because we are already created. Everything that we have, when we were created, we have in us what we need to reach our potential. But the questions are we being, are the next generation being cultivated, so that when we see young leaders step up, we're not so surprised. And so it seems like we're waiting for somebody to hand us a package or a process that says this person's name on it and this person is next. And what we really see is leaders that are rising above, because they see what the needs are and they're not waiting for permission. And so my book is to encourage everyone to consider their role, and that this is the right time to be able to step in into leadership roles. Um, and there's also times for transition. We don't do transitions well. So I talk about that in my book in regards to preparing the next generation, and then working with the current generation. Because right now we are leading across, as we would say, transgenerational, which is three generations, where we have the baby boomers leaving, millenniums right in the midst where they're reigning in the workplace, and then we have the Generation Z coming right behind us. And so we're leading across three generations, and now being able to do so effectively, but more so being able to do so with the passion for all the struggles that we are facing as a society, so that what's desired from leadership by the current generation has shifted based on their life experiences. And so we'll talk more about that as well in my book. And so I think that's really what I wanted to kind of share with everyone today. Any questions from me? Let's just chat about leadership. I mean, throw your questions out and let's just have a conversation. I don't have all the answers. So my goal is that we collaborate and we have a collective conversation about leadership, and so that we can be able to rethink leadership together, and be able to have an impact, as uh, as so eloquently described by our host, is having ministries that impact, ministries that make a difference, um, and make a change for our society. Well, I can tell you that if you want to be able to, what qualities to look for in a leader? Great question. Um, is that Roxanne? So I would tell you, and again, I'm going to get into this some more tomorrow. Given today's generation of leaders that are coming up, Roxanne, we're talking about a generation of individuals who um, believe and would want leadership that lead with more compassion, because their value system about leadership has shifted or been formed and informed by their life experiences, millennials in the past 10 years. So when you look at what has happened in the past year and 2 years, that has also caused them to be able to say, and I'm going to answer your question. I just wanted to address why. Um, the qualities to look for in a leader are those who can nurture the generation coming up now. And the generation that's coming up now in the millennials and the gen, they are looking for flexibility. They pretty much have one foot in the door and one foot out the door when it comes to organizations. And not because they think that they're entitled, but because they look at and have an expectation of accountability when it comes to leadership. And so if they're looking for, and they definitely look for flexibility over dollars and cents. And so if what they're seeking is not what's being offered, then that's what causes the next generation to move on quickly. Whereas in our generation, we would get to a job and we would stay there, and that doesn't happen. So the type of leader that this generation requires is the qualities that inspire, a transformational type leadership, a servant heart leadership. Those are the type of leadership styles that we are looking for. That is said through documentation and research that's required to nurture this generation is transformational leadership. And in those in transformation and servanthood alike, they have uh, uh, they lead by inspiration, and they lead by transformation. They don't lead by conversion or fear, the ones we were taught. Um, and they also, transformational leadership also has that uh, tool in there where we talk about the leadership challenge, with meaning that um, not leading by the status quo, and so you have to be able to make that human connection with people and meet them where they are, because when people come to work, they have life before work and life outside of work. And so you have to find the qualities of a leader who are able to connect, make a human connection, treat people needs as holy. um, that was Dr. Henry in his book, The Politics of Jesus, is that we would meet people where they are and treat their needs as holy, as though we are serving God. That is exactly how we would serve the people of God. And so when we talk about leadership in the church, it's amazing that you would have an expectation of what leadership looked like in church, but then you don't see it. And so I think we have to have more conversations about what that looks like, as opposed to the assuming uh, perception that whoever's in leadership, um, then everything is just the way it needs to be. But I think in this time, Roxanne, is that it requires us to be more like Jesus. I look at it as every day I go out to be a leader, I am actually going out to fill on the Great Commission, where I'm able to serve those who are, I don't like to say least of those, because that means that there's somebody greater, but that those who are in needs. And like Reverend Barber, he has a great campaign that talks about those who are in need. And that's the quality of leaders that we really need to be able to uplift and encourage and nurture, so that they can meet people's needs and treat their needs as holy. Because here's what people don't understand when it comes to being a leader: it's more about the fact of recognizing that the needs of the people are the seeds for the social issue. And I didn't get that. That's not my line. I did not create that. That is one that comes out of my group that I meet with the Black clergies on a monthly basis. And one of the pastors, as we were talking about it, I said, how can we as a church also be the extended arm of the community when it comes to leadership, like the Black church was before, during my ancestral time? I was raised in the church. And so the church has always been an extension of the community, and the community an extension of the church. And so there was no separate pathway. They were one and the same. And so that is why I think that we have to have these honest conversations about leadership when we go. I think it was Dr. Otis Marsh today who talked about when we go to retreats, we have to be able to go to retreats that feed the soul, and not one built on processes, but one built on purpose. And so what I'm experiencing in my community is what I would like the church to be able to take on as a leader and guide me. That's why I talk about social justice as civic discipleship, because leadership continues. Whatever is affecting us in the community is also affecting us when we go to church. It doesn't just stop. And so the needs are the seeds of the social issues. And so that is what type of leaders that we need. Those who are willing to go into the community. And then the generation coming up now talks about the fact that what concerns me in my community has to be also that concerns my organizational leader. So again, it's not just in churches, it's in every organization, because this generation, as the title would say, they reign in the workplace. Because for the past 10 years, they are the majority right now. They have been becoming the majority for the past 10 years. And for the next 10 years, they will also, they meaning the millenniums, and followed by the generation Z. And so they want the leaders who are able to relate to their situation, to their community, and to invest in them. And so we have to really talk about the holistic approach of leadership. And so we'll talk some more about that tomorrow too. The holistic approach of leadership and the holistic view of leaders. Um, this has been absolutely great, Roxanne. Thank you for that question. So let me just ask a question to each of you. What comes to mind what is your greatest challenge when it comes to leadership? What comes to mind as your greatest challenge as a leader or as someone who's under leadership? I know we have some challenges out there, and I like to be able to pray about those and to think about those and talk about those tomorrow when we present. But one of the challenges, like I said, Roxanne, community and unity, yes. Communication and unity. So I want to share this with you, Roxanne. When I had one of my conversations, I had one of my seasoned leaders who's from a large church. He's also a pastor of his own church. And so he's a pastor, he does the financial part, and he has his own church as well, and does the finance for another church, a mega church. And so one of the things that we talked about in regards to communication and unity is that I asked the question, what is it that you would like to hand off or transition better when it comes to the next generation? And the answer was communication. We do not, how do we say, we do not do a good job as leaders in regards to communication. But one of the things that the seasoned leader talked about also was, we're used to picking up a phone and being able to have a conversation and get some results. This generation picks up a phone and they'll text about it. And so we have to be able to understand that there is value in communication. And again, when we bring together those who are leaders from seasoned leaders along with our new innovative leaders, that we'll be able to celebrate the seasoned leaders and figure out what that looks like when it comes to communication. There is definitely an opportunity to pick up a phone and have a conversation and make that personal connection. But again, we are talking about how to do communication better. Another thing You talk about unity. Again, what concerns me when I come to work as an individual, you cannot treat every individual the same. Everyone has a different situation going on, or everyone have a different question. So no two people are alike, and that's why I think we have to talk about leadership in regards to individual context. Uh, what each person and who you are responsible for and accountable for are dealing with, even if it's just the fact of hours. Some people prefer the virtual. And here's what is surprising when it comes to unity. There are most people who would say, I'm finding that more CEOs would like to go back into the workplace, but less employees would like to go back into the workplace. And so either way, virtual workspace is here to stay. So we talk about virtual workspace, and we talk about leading at a distance. That's the other thing. So when you talk about developing your leaders and identifying the leaders that you need versus the leaders that you have, you're going to have to consider also leading at a distance, what that looks like, what type of leadership style that requires. And so what it is that leading at a distance is difficult. It is, but it's something that is one of those situations, Roz, where um, when we entered into the pandemic, there were things we discovered that we should have been doing all along, even in church. But we waited until the pandemic came to start it. So we have been learning at a distance for some time. There were a time we weren't even learning at a distance. When I was in the military in the early 1990s, we did not have the opportunity to um, go to school virtually. So we were limited to what we could achieve. But now that is not the story. So times have changed and situations have changed. And so leading at a distance is also that. And so we have to now, uh, and I write about that, what it looks like to lead at a distance, because virtual workspace is not going anywhere. It was already in place and now it's here to stay. Because one, people and leaders find that they can coordinate and schedule more meetings virtually in 1 week. Of course, everyone know that when it comes to Zoom burnout, then it would have taken them to just schedule, fly there and fly back and set it up and planning. So there's that cost attached to it also. So there's a lot to talk about when it talks about your church finances. That's the other thing when it comes to leadership, is that there's a responsibility to be accountable and to and be financially stable when it comes to that. And if you're not financially stable, then that would bring a challenge in regards to waiting to transition from leader to leader, because it's not like you want it to be. So we have to talk about the uncomfortable conversations of growth, um, and where leadership has a role in that, and what that looks like when it comes to transitioning. So we talk about integrity of leadership when it comes to succession planning, succession management. We talk about transparency. We talk about leadership is not a birthright, and so that we need to be able to do the work as leaders, developing more leaders, being able to nurture those to reach their full potential, and to create space for those who are seeking to be in leadership roles, and not waiting for permission to be in leadership roles. You know what God has given you to do. Again, we were created out of the image of God, and so we were created with the heart to lead. The question is, have we been nurtured in regarding the soft skills? The soft skills. And so that's why I believe that we could really benefit our next generation in regards to learning some things from them and them learning some things from us. And that's why I say we celebrate our wisdom, and our roots need our innovation when it comes to our next generation. Leading at a distance is difficult. People don't like change, but that's why I talk about building leadership, building change into your leadership programs, into your leadership succession management. And I talk more about succession management, and I talk very little about leadership development, because I think that we are able to understand what leadership development is. Of course, we could talk about what that looks like now, but I want to talk about creating Joshua's, duplicating or replicating or building more Joshuas, equipping the next generation. Let's just say that. And that is an ongoing process. So every day that Moses is leading, Moses is also equipping and preparing the next generation of Joshua. And so that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow. So you pray for me. This is not a Bible study. I'm just putting it into theological context for you tomorrow, so that we could be able to see that as we do ministry that impact, that there's definitely opportunities for us to be innovative about this, and to think, to rethink leadership, and rethink our role as leaders, and rethink the responsibility we have to one another. So I thank you, Roz. I thank you, Roxy, for your questions. This has been very enlightening for me to be able to share with you what my passion is, and why in this season, as there's everything to everything, there's a season, and in this season, leadership is really front and center. And some would say we in a leadership crisis, but I believe in opportunities. And so this is a season that God has said for us to be conscious in regards to leadership being a choice. So I tell you, you can also order my book. You can pre-order my book by sending me an email to Fowler. I don't know if I can type in here. There you go. Fowler 9348 at, let me do that right. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Fowler 9348. I will be able to put a link out on my social medias. You could follow me at Dr. Fowler on LinkedIn. You could follow me at Arnita Fowler on Facebook. And I'll be able to share with you a release date for my book. Again, I'm excited about it. I'm excited because we need to put our story in writing and tell our own narrative. And I'm going to ask those of you who are pursuing education out there, who have done education, and even if you just have a story to tell, put it in writing so we can fill the bookshelves with our own personal narrative. And so here's my email where you can pre-order. And I thank you so much. I appreciate you. No, I did not have any slides or PowerPoint because, you can get PowerPoint overload. And I wanted to just have a dynamic conversation and speak from the heart and be able to share with you why it is that God has moved me now to be able to write about leadership, and that I can see what God is calling me to be in this season, and that is to contribute to the conversation where we can talk about those hard topics in regard to the breach of leadership. So thank you again, everyone. I appreciate you. I'm going to sign off, and if you have no more questions for me, God bless you. And I'm just going to quickly close with a quick word of prayer. Lord, we thank you for this opportunity to be able to touch and agree, to be able to just have a conversation about what leadership looks like, and what it is that God will want us to do in this season, and who it is that God is calling us to be, and what anointing it is. How sweet it is to have God's anointing on our lives right now. But we know that God wastes not anything, but that we were created in his image to be able to lead those, and then to be able to be led, and to be able to feed his sheep, oh Heavenly Father, and continue the great commission of being able to nurture one another, to create space for one another, that we may be able to still have the Moses and the Joshuas of our time, oh Heavenly Father. So I thank you for the word. I thank you for this platform and this and the summit, and thank you for our host, Reverend LaKesha Womack. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Thank you, oh Lord. Thank you, thank you. Good evening, and have a blessed evening. I'll sit here unless someone else has a question. I still have 6 minutes to go, and I'm sitting here as long as you would sit here. And tell me what church or what area you're from, Roxanne, if you're still there. What area are you from, Roxanne? And what area are you from, Rosalind? Also, I would say that we have our new book. I got a new book, so I want to give a shout out to Reverend LaKesha Womack that we got our book in today. And this has been great. What a blessing. I want to thank you for the vision. Thank you for following your heart and what God has given you to do, Reverend LaKesha Womack. And so if you haven't got your copy already, make sure you get your copy. It's Ministry That Impacts. And again, it's a collection of church strategies or collection of strategies to help leaders develop ministries that will have an impact in their congregation and their communities. So again, I just want to say thank you. Thank you. You can get Ministry The Impact book off of Amazon. You can get it in the Kindle for 99 cents, or you can get the hard copy as well as the soft copy. So that has been great. And tomorrow will be day 3, so I look forward to seeing and sharing with you tomorrow at 2:00. Again, you can get my book, pre-order my book from my email, or contact me on my email, and I'll be able to let you know exactly when to pre-order, or give you the link so you can pre-order, and its release date. It has been wonderful. And if you want to be able to follow, you can follow online on social media for Rethinking Church Strategies. And you'll be able to have more communication, see what status on what we're doing for tomorrow. Tomorrow's program is definitely available for everyone to see. Tomorrow is, wow, tomorrow is Friday, so it's day 3. And so we're going to have the opportunity to have new, different presentations tomorrow. And I pray you will be able to take the opportunity to join us and share with your friends. And again, I see you early in the morning at 8:00. This has been wonderful. This has been great. Thank you once again, everyone. And there are other workshops going on tomorrow. Again, the book is called Leadership is a Choice. Leadership is a choice, time to lead and a time to leave. And it, again, is us being able to have the opportunity to step into our greatness and be able to be that leader that God would want us to be. And this is the season where we're looking for everyone to just trust and believe that you're all that God wants you to be. Thank you. Thank you, Ron, for coming. I appreciate you for hanging in here with us, and thank you for your questions. Thank you, Roxanne, for being able to share your thought. I am glad that God is able to give me what thus would say the Lord, and to be able to communicate to you from a standpoint of what it's like to be a leader, and in regards to shifting responsibilities, or God, the season that we're in is a shift in how we too have to be able to consider that, and that God is making room to elevate us for another leader. So shifting or leaving does not mean stopping. It just means taking a different leadership pathway so that God could continue to elevate us. And so it has been a great opportunity to share with each and every one of you. And I am just so grateful uh, to be able to have this conversation. Thank you for your questions. And I pray that we can stay in contact. Again, you can find me on my social medias under my name is Dr. Arnita Fowler, or you can get me as Arnita Fowler. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, and I'm on Facebook, and I'm on LinkedIn. And so, believe it or not, God has been able to direct me and guide me. And so I thank you, each and every one of you. Pray for wherever your journey leads you, that you're able to, God is able to order our steps and our thoughts, and guide us in that right direction into all the decisions that we need to take as leaders. And I believe that He will. And so God is so good and gracious. So I thank you for this time today. Thank you for the opportunity to share. And again, stay tuned, follow me, email me, and I'll share with you where you can pre-order my book. Blessings. Have a good evening, everyone. Take care. Not sure. I don't want to leave out on anybody. But good evening. Be blessed and anointed